The ruins of the London Under harbored many secrets. Ilara had heard the stories whispered in her settlement, stories of long-forgotten tunnels beneath the city where the earth had swallowed trains whole and shadows still moved through the dust of a lost world. She had never believed them, not until the day she found herself standing at the entrance of the old underground station. She was only 16, but the world no longer cared about the ages of children. After the cataclysm, the old lines of time and history had blurred. Now it was just survival, and Ilara was good at surviving. Her boots crunched over the rubble as she descended the stairs into the forgotten depths. Overhead, daylight dimmed as she moved deeper into the bones of the city. The walls were caked in grime and streaks of rust, but she could still make out the faded names of places she would never know. Piccadilly, Waterloo, Charing Cross. She had heard once that people used to travel through these tunnels, thousands of them every day, in a time when the world was still whole. It seemed like madness now. The stale air smelled of mildew and rot. Ilara pulled her scarf tighter around her face, muffling the scent. Her torch flickered in her hand, casting a pale beam into the darkness. She had come to find supplies, food, batteries, maybe even an old generator if she was lucky. Her people needed them, but more than that, she came because something deep inside her wanted to understand what this place had been before everything had changed. She paused as she reached the platform. The station stretched out in both directions, swallowed by shadows. There were no signs of life, but Ilara knew better than to trust silence. She crouched behind a pillar, listening, her ears tuned to every creak and shift of the decaying structure. Nothing. Just a steady drip of water somewhere deep in the tunnels. She allowed herself to breathe again and stood, moving towards the derelict train cars that still sat on tracks like the skeletal remains of some great beast. The windows were shattered, old graffiti marking the rusting metal. She stepped inside one of the cars, her torch sweeping across empty seats and littered debris. And then she saw it, a faint, glowing mark on the floor near the door. It was small, barely noticeable, a symbol. She knelt to examine it. Etched into the grime, there was a circle with an arrow through it, pointing down into the depths of the tunnel, and it glowed. Her heart skipped a beat. The symbol had been whispered about in the settlement, the mark of the Hollow Ones, a group of scavengers who had long disappeared into the tunnels after the cataclysm, rumored to have found something beneath the city, a power, a treasure, something worth killing for. No one had ever come back from looking for them. Ilara felt a cold thrill run down her spine. She wasn't looking for trouble, but if the Hollow Ones still existed, they could have resources, things her people desperately needed. She could turn back now and never speak of this, or she could follow the symbol. She hesitated only a moment before stepping off the platform and onto the tracks. The arrow pointed deeper into the darkness, where the tunnels stretched for kilometers, an endless labyrinth beneath the bones of London. The ground was slick, the air damp and heavy, but Ilara pressed on. Minutes passed. The further she went, the more the walls seemed to close in. Strange shapes flickered at the edge of her vision, shadows playing tricks on her mind. She thought she heard whispers, the sounds of movement, but she couldn't tell if they were real or just the noise of her own passage echoing back at her. And then she saw it. Another mark, this time painted on the tunnel wall. The same symbol. The arrow pointed to an iron gate partially hidden by debris. She pushed it open with a creak that echoed down the tunnel. Beyond it, a stairwell spiraled downwards, carved into the very earth. She hesitated, but the pull of the unknown was too strong. Step by step, she descended until the air became thick with heat and something else, something faintly metallic. Her torch sputtered, and for a moment she was plunged into darkness. Panic surged in her chest, but the torch flickered back to life as she banged it against her hand. And then she saw what lay at the bottom of the stairs. A chamber, vast and ancient, opened before her, filled with the remnants of a once thriving civilization. Machines, their purpose long forgotten, lined the walls, their metal frames tinged with rust, with strange-looking mushrooms growing around them. But at the center of it all was something more, an orb pulsing with dark energy suspended in the air. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. Ilara took a step closer, her heart racing. This was it. This was what the Hollow Ones had been searching for. But as she approached, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Voices, not from the tunnel, but from within her own mind. They spoke of power, of knowledge, of a world rebuilt in her image. She was drawn to the orb's light, unable to stop herself. And then a figure stepped from the shadows. A man, his gaunt form barely a silhouette in the pulsing light of the underground chamber. His eyes were what caught her attention first. Black, like the void, with tiny specks of silver floating in the darkness as though his pupils contained stars. They seemed to draw in the light, absorbing it, making him more shadow than flesh.
"You shouldn't have come here,"
he rasped, his voice brittle like the cracking of dry earth. Ilara's heart raced as she stood only a few meters from the orb suspended in the air. The pulsing light from the orb grew stronger, as if it had sensed her presence. For a moment she thought about turning back, but she could feel something deep in her, some unexplainable pull urging her to stay. "Who are you?" she whispered, still holding the torch in one hand, though its beam had flickered out as she had neared the orb. The man smiled, a broken, twisted thing.
"I was like you once, lost, curious, a wanderer looking for something to save what's left of this world."
His eyes looked at the orb, and his smile faded.
"But now, I am a Hollow One."
Ilara's breath caught in her throat. The stories she had heard of the Hollow Ones had always been fragmented, rumors passed from one scavenger to another. No one had ever confirmed what had happened to them, or what they had found in the depths. "What is this place?" she asked, her gaze shifting between the man and the orb. It now pulsed with a slow, rhythmic light, almost like a heartbeat.
"It is ancient,"
the man said, stepping closer though his movements were slow, his limbs heavy, as though something unseen weighed him down.
"It has been here since before the calamity, before the world came crashing down. It persists. The machine."
He trailed off, his voice distant, as though recalling something from another time.
"It waits, and it takes."
"What does it take?" Ilara asked, her voice trembling as her hand hovered near the orb, feeling the warmth radiating from it. The man's black eyes flashed, the silver specks swirling like stars in his gaze.
"It takes us. It took me. And now it will take you."
Before she could pull away, his hand shot forward, gripping her wrist and forcing her hand onto the orb. Pain seared through her, as if the light itself had become fire. Her scream echoed through the chamber, but the man's grip was unrelenting. The orb pulsed brighter, and Ilara's mind was filled with images, flashes of a world long gone, of cities built and destroyed, of human beings consumed by the very machines they had created. The whispers in her mind grew louder, more insistent. They weren't just voices, they were commands. The light of the orb surged, and Ilara felt something cold and sharp pierce her skin. She looked down in horror as tiny silver tendrils snaked from the orb into her hand, spreading across her arm like veins of liquid metal. She could feel them moving inside her, crawling under her skin, into her bloodstream, her muscles. They carried an overwhelming pressure, a presence that she couldn't fight.
"They're called nanites," he said. "The orb injects them into those who come too close, feeds them into your blood, your mind, until there's nothing left but obedience."
Her vision cleared just enough to see her arm. The veins beneath her skin had turned black, streaked. She yanked her hand back from the orb, but the damage had already been done. What did you do to me?" Ilara gasped, clutching her arm. The man watched her with a sad, almost resigned expression.
"You are becoming one of us now. You are bound to the machine. It will speak to you, guide you. You will serve it, just as we all do."
Other figures had emerged from the darkness. "No!" she shouted, stumbling back, but her body was already changing. The warmth in her veins was turning cold, and her thoughts, her own thoughts, began to slip away, replaced by a single unyielding directive: obey. The man stepped near, his expression distant, hollow.
"It's too late. The nanites are inside you. Soon you will hear the machine, and you will obey. It is eternal, just as we are."
Ilara's head jerked up, her breathing labored. "No, I won't be like you."
"You don't have a choice," he said softly. "None of us did."
In the back of her mind she could feel it, the machine, vast and ancient, far beneath the surface, waiting. It wasn't just a machine, it was a consciousness, an intelligence. Ilara struggled to her feet, her body shaking with the effort. "I won't let it control me," she hissed. But her voice was weaker and she could already hear the whispering commands growing louder.
"Fight it if you want,"
the man said, his tone soft.
"The transformation is almost complete. In the end, the machine always wins."
Ilara's body convulsed as the last of her resistance faltered, and she dropped to her knees once more. The machine's voice echoed through her mind.
"Serve, obey, build."
When she stood again, her face was blank, her eyes voids of black with silver glinting like stars. Ilara was no more. Only a hollow one remained, another servant to the ancient machine beneath the ruins of London.